Hi, this is a demonstration of what someone can do with a Linux-based live DVD. The same image can also be loaded onto a USB thumb drive or an SD card or a compact flash card, which makes this approach really flexible depending on the hardware available on the computer. I would also like to point out at this point before proceeding any further that this approach works on almost any PC, even PCs without a hard disk drive, which makes this solution possible as a solution for a diskless workstation for security concerns. In this case, we'll start to boot from a CD-ROM, which is option number 3. Most of the time, we just need to plug it in and restart the system, and it will boot from the live DVD. In this case, I just want to pause the screen before I start up or before I proceed any further. I press the key 3 to start from the quote-unquote CD-ROM. This is all being run inside a virtual machine, so there's no physical CD-ROM. It only maps to a file that is fed to the emulator as the CD-ROM. So I press the 3 button, and this is the startup screen. Most people should use a 686 as long as they have a Pentium type of processor. The other options are, they're useful, but not. Most people do not need to use the other options. So we'll go ahead and get started with Live 686, and this will spew out a lot of startup messages, which Windows hides from the end user. Linux has a tradition of showing the end user everything that it is doing when it's starting up, which can be useful for the experts but can be very distracting for people who are not used to it. But in case the startup sequence is not successful, the end user can at least tell tech support what they're seeing on the screen, what has failed, what is successful, where it is hanging up, what was the last message displayed, and so on and so forth. So that's actually really good for helpful for tech support. And now we are moving into the graphical user interface directly, which is one of the behaviors that can be changed. But since this is a live DVD, there's no associated hard drive storage, and as a result, there's really no other user setup in the system. And this is a fairly typical startup screen for a live DVD distribution, especially in the case of Linux. It gives you a very simplistic type of interface. First thing we want to do is to change the system resolution. We will go to Preferences, go all the way down to Monitors, and change the size of the screen to 1024 by 768. I only have to do this because I'm doing this inside a virtual machine instead of using a physical machine. If someone is using a physical machine, it typically will find out what is the native resolution of the monitor and default to the native resolution of the monitor. Right now we are running the Linux Live DVD on a fairly typical system, about 1 gig of RAM, have a reasonable VGA controller for graphics, and have sound card and a network card. The first thing I want to do is to show you what kind of applications are in the system or included in the live DVD. Once again, these application programs are already preloaded onto the live DVD. There is no need to load anything or install anything on a hard drive. This will work even on a computer without a hard drive. Under applications, we have the typical accessories. Archive Manager is kind of like a zip-unzip program. We have the usual calculator. We have 2 text editors. One is called gedit, which is kind of like Notepad, same type of features. One is called gvim, which is really intended only for programmers. The rest of this, is not really useful for our target audience, so I won't even go in and mention that. In terms of graphics programs, we have the GIMP, which is kind of like Photoshop except it is open sourced. Inkscape is kind of like freehand, or Illustrator from Adobe, and of course in this case it is also open sourced. OpenOffice.org Draw is a component of OpenOffice, and it allows a person to draw pictures that are scalable, which is pretty useful. Scribus NG is for page layout and publication. it's kind of like a miniature version of InDesign or some other desktop publishing software. It's not quite as polished or as powerful and filled with features, but once again, it is free and it can be used for brochures and resume and a lot of many other things that people might want to do. Under Internet, we have the typical browser, which is iceweasel. We have a dedicated email client called Evolution Mail. The rest are not really that useful for an end user, maybe except for BitTorrent, because everybody likes to share files. The rest, I don't think a regular end user will find any use of. Under Office, we have the entire Open Office suite. Base is a database program, kind of like Access. Calc is the spreadsheet program, kind of like Excel. Draw, we have talked about it already. Impress is kind of like PowerPoint. Math is for editing math equations. It's not that useful by itself. It's kind of like Microsoft Equation Editor. Writer is kind of like Microsoft Word. And all of these products from OpenOffice.org, with the exception of Base and possibly Draw, can read and write Microsoft formats. That means Calc can open and also can save to Excel XLSX formats and also some of the previous versions. Project management here can be useful for some people who are managing a project. It's kind of like Microsoft Project, and once again, not as powerful or full-featured, but nonetheless, for beginning users, it can be quite useful. We have under others, we have some board layout programs that are not typically useful. Under sound and video, we have some really useful programs. Audacity is a audio editor. Someone can use Audacity to record, overlay, and even produce multi-track audio output files. We have a Brasero, which is it's kind of like Nero Express. It's for burning CDs. We have Desktop Recorder, which is useful if someone wants to do a recording session on the screen. We have Movie Player, which is the default media player. It's not really quite as good as VLC Media Player. I typically use VLC Media Player instead of the default movie player. MPlayer Media Player is also quite good. It is compatible with a lot of different formats and also codecs. I would like to point out that VLC Media Player as well as MPlayer Media Player, both of these have more compatibility with different types of codecs and file formats than Windows' own media player, with the exception of DRM material, basically anything that is already copyrighted that may require a Microsoft codec. That's a really quick overview of what the live DVD distribution can do. We'll just go ahead and take a look at some of these options here and see whether it looks the same as on a regular PC running Windows. Iceweasel is basically Firefox. It's just a play of the name. And here we have a fairly typical blank page to start up with. We can go to any website and we can go to YouTube, for instance. And you can see that it has no problem connecting to YouTube. And we can even go ahead and look at some of these video clips here. And you can see that it has no problem playing Flash. So everything that is multimedia is playable inside the live DVD distribution. So that's one quick demonstration. Let's go ahead and open up some of the other applications. In other words, let's go to Office here and open up OpenOffice Calc, which is kind of like an Excel spreadsheet program. And you can see that I can quite easily multitask, open up multiple windows or multiple applications at the same time. If I had an Excel file, I would be able to demonstrate that OpenOffice is compatible with Microsoft Excel files. But since I don't, it's kind of, I would just skip that step. Inside OpenOffice, we can also open up Writer, which is a text document. We can open up a text document, which will open up Writer, which is a word processing program. And once again, this is compatible with the Microsoft doc files or docx file if you're using 2007 or 2010. If you just go to File and click Save As, and we can specify file type, you can see that you can save under all these different file types, including Microsoft Word 97 2000 XP, Word 95, Word 6.0, which are really old versions for backward compatibility, rich text format, which is also excellent for backward compatibility. You can publish it as HTML documents. You can also save it to docx, which is the 2007 file format, as well as some of the formats that I do not know of. Okay, very interesting. If we go back to the the Calc application and go to File and then click Save As, we can also see the different types of file we can save the document as. We can save it into Excel as for Excel 97 2000 XP. We can save it as an Excel 95 file. We can save it to Excel 5.0, which is really old. We can also save it as Excel 2007 XML file, which is the typical file format that we use with Excel 2007 as well as Excel 2010. So as you can see, these programs are quite compatible with the Microsoft equivalent programs. Under Office, we also have Impress, which is a PowerPoint type of program. You can open it with an empty presentation, or if you already have templates, you can open it in the specific template. We'll just go ahead and create the presentation file here. It can be used. It has animation. It has multimedia support. It has different templates. Has a concept of master slide, and so on and so forth. So, in other words, it is quite powerful. You can use it to do quite a bit of presentations. Now that we have opened up several programs, we can take a look at how much RAM is actually being used. And this part, most end users don't have to do it. I'm just doing it because I want to take a look at how much resources are consumed at this point. And it shows that we have 1 gig of RAM available. It looks like 1 gig is actually all used up, but that's actually not the case, because of the 1 gig that is quote-unquote used, 472 megabytes are actually being used for caching purposes, which means this amount is actually available to run additional programs. We have only used up less than 600 megabytes at this point with all these programs, the operating system, and the GUI already running. In terms of processor resources, it is only consuming 5% of all the available processing resources here, which is not a whole lot. And once again, end users really don't need to take a look at this. I'm just curious as to how much resources the system is consuming at this point. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this one. There are also other programs under education that I can install onto the live DVD. These programs can range to